to Donald Trump. Hello, I'm Adrienne Arsenault. This is a CBC News special. Americans have elected Donald Trump as their next president. Weeks of those deadlock polls between Trump and Kamala Harris in crucial swing states suggested a close, drawn-out contest. But in the end, Trump won the Electoral College. He won the popular vote, which matters only in that it removes any doubt at all that a second term for Donald Trump is precisely what most Americans wanted. So there is still some counting happening. Here's where the Electoral College stands right now. Trump has 291 votes. That's more than he needed to cross the 270 threshold to win the White House. And he did it, of course, by capturing effectively all the swing states. Now, there's still a bit more counting to go, but we can say for certain that he won North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. And when this is all said and done, he may indeed have all those swing states. So Donald Trump reshaped the Republican Party in his own image, focused on what he wants and how he wants it to happen in his wake, leaving many traditional Republican supporters and leaders sort of stuck in the political wilderness. So let's now take a look at the campaign that brought Americans to this moment.
God bless the USA.
Donald Trump began his campaign with baggage, twice impeached, recently convicted on criminal charges in New York. And still, the former president shut out any serious challengers for the Republican nomination. At first, it looked like a rematch against President Joe Biden.
Every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look.
And Trump certainly nudged up in the polls when Biden botched the debate.
Take a look at what happened.
Then a shock. July 13th in Pennsylvania, a gunman fired at Donald Trump, killing a rally attendee and wounding Trump's right ear. Trump was defiant. His immediate reaction resulted in a political image for the ages. Just over a week later, another surprise.
So now we have a new victim to defeat, Lion Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
See, have fun.
Kamala Harris raised the stakes.
You're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling.
Polls consistently said the race looked like a toss-up. Then on a golf course in Florida where the former president was playing, a man seemingly planning another assassination attempt was arrested with an assault rifle. Undeterred, Trump returned to the site of the first attempt on his life in Pennsylvania.
On this very ground, a cold-blooded assassin aimed to silence me.
Donald Trump pushing the promise he is tougher on crime, on the border, better on the economy, and destined to be in the White House again.
I'd like to begin by asking a very simple question. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
So we have extensive coverage for you this hour, and I have some company with me in studio, sort of have the band back together again to help us talk through this. Washington veteran, the CBC's Paul Hunter, and our chief political correspondent, Rosie Barton. I know it's been, what, a hot 10 minutes since we all last spent some time together. We're going to go through this, but first I'd like to take us to Katie Simpson, who got a front row seat inside Howard University for Kamala Harris's speech. Katie, you were there all night. You're there again today. I think you were one of the last people there as they were turning out the lights and people were leaving. Can you set things up for us today? What are you seeing and hearing there?
There are a lot of disappointed Democrats that are gathered behind me here at Howard University. This, of course, was supposed to be the site that they had hoped there would be a moment in history, that this would at least be the start of a path to victory. But, of course, as those election results came in and the reality check set in here, leveling a really deep sense of disappointment among supporters. Today, we've seen staffers embracing one another in deep hugs. We've seen people with very puffy eyes, people being up late. There have been some tears. But there's also a great sense of pride. A number of people we've spoken to who lined up to also witnessed history this moment, this concession speech, saying that they think Kamala Harris ran a really good campaign. Given that she came in so late in the game, she was able to raise over $1 billion. It seemed like momentum was heading in her direction, but ultimately her message fell short. We asked some of these Democrats who are here today, in these initial hours after the loss, and they're still processing this moment, are there any moments that stand out to them as, they wish something different had gone on? A lot of people a lot of these Democrats thought that Kamala Harris did the best job that she could in the limited time frame that she had, pointing to President Joe Biden and those around him questioning why he stayed in the race as long as he did. It was that moment, that CNN debate back in late June, when the world saw Joe Biden struggle to answer questions, struggle to stay on track, and really it was a campaign-ending debate performance. And there seems to be a sense of resentment, at least among some Democrats I spoke to today, not everyone, but what we are hearing is that why was it allowed to get to that point? Why couldn't Joe Biden have stepped aside earlier so there could be the traditional primary, so that Democrats could pick the candidate, and that perhaps they'd have a better shot at beating Donald Trump? But again, there is also a sense of pride here. This is Howard University. It's an HBCU, historical black college or university for Canadians who might not know what that means. There is a real sense of pride that Kamala Harris was a presidential nominee, is currently the vice president. And so it's really a heavy mix of disappointment, heartbreak, and I expect we'll see a little bit of that from Kamala Harris when she walks out on stage today, but still a deep-rooted sense of pride. Expect possibly to hear from Kamala Harris a message of unity. We have a little sort of preview of what she might say just based on what we know about the phone call she made to Donald Trump earlier today to concede the race. She said she was going to commit to a peaceful transfer of power and spoke of themes of unity on their very brief call. So that, I suspect, is a lot of what we're going to hear anytime now.
So, Katie, thanks for that. Two things. Just as people are looking at the right of the screen, you'll see that we're just staring at an empty podium. That is because we're expecting to see her come through there shortly, and obviously we will go to her when we do. You should know that the time for this has bounced around like a bit of a bouncing ball today. Was it 6 o'clock? Was it 5 o'clock? Maybe it'll be 3 o'clock. Now it's 4 o'clock. We'll see. I'm interested, Katie, in what you're talking about, the phone call with Donald Trump. I don't think that phone call was made, and correct me if I'm wrong on the timing, it was around like 1 o'clock in the afternoon today it was made. Why did it take so long to make that phone call?
It is my understanding efforts were made to reach out to Donald Trump, but they couldn't necessarily coordinate their schedule. That is my early understanding of what was going on. Donald Trump, in the sort of immediate aftermath, in the hours after his win, becoming the president-elect, he's been taking a lot of phone calls from foreign leaders. We've got reports from U.S. news outlets that he's speaking with Benjamin Netanyahu, spoke with Chinese President Xi Jinping, speaking with India's Narendra Modi. Those are some of the phone calls that he's been taking as well today. There is not a lot of love lost between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. They never actually met in person before that debate that took place not that long ago, within the last 100 days since Kamala Harris became the official Democratic nominee. And so this was a deeply personal, deeply bitter campaign fight. We heard a lot of personal insults coming from Republicans and the Donald Trump campaign. We also saw Kamala Harris saying that she thought Donald Trump was a fascist, agreeing with some of Trump's former staffers, senior staffers, who had concerns about the way he wanted to lead and the way he wanted to wield power. So there are a lot of deep divisions here, but that American tradition of making that phone call, of accepting defeat and conceding in order to make sure there is a peaceful transfer of power. Everyone saw what happened in 2020 when Donald Trump continued to spread lies about election fraud, claiming that the election was stolen from him. It is something that he still maintains or had maintained throughout the course of his campaign. And when you talk with Americans, particularly in Washington, D.C., those who lived through the violence of January 6th, more political violence is something that Americans are genuinely genuinely concerned about. And so doing the traditional things, doing the nod to we want to make sure that everyone is committed to a peaceful transfer of power, that is something that people will be looking for, and perhaps a message of unity from Kamala Harris.
All right, Katie Simpson, it's so interesting to hear you talk about political violence and then seeing on the right of the screen Nancy Pelosi, whose husband, of course, was a victim of terrible political violence. She is obviously there at Howard University. Lots of smiles there, but I think that might just be people being friendly, because within the Democratic Party, there are no smiles right now. They have to reinvent exactly what their party is all about, what direction it goes in, and what the future of its strategy is, what the future leaders are. There's a lot of work to be done, and in Nancy Pelosi and perhaps in Kamala Harris, you're looking at the past of the Democratic Party. All right, Katie Simpson at Howard University. While we wait for Kamala Harris, again, this was supposed to be 4 o'clock. The latest we heard that she would speak. It's past that now, but you have seen some of her officials at the microphone just testing the prompter and whatnot. So while we watch, let's turn to Paul Hunter. So interesting, right? What an interesting experience this has been. When we were watching that pack before, you think about that political debate where Biden was just, it was just...
Still hard to watch.
Yeah, devastating for him, right? And then also that terrible moment of the attempted assassination on Donald Trump that resulted in that political image. Both those events within a few weeks of each other will go down, I think, in political history as like seminal moments for the United States.
Pretty sure I said to you on TV that night, he just won the election.
Correct.
How prescient was I? I'm so smart, aren't I? Let's be honest. There's the last, throw in, I don't know what the iconic image of Kamala Harris would be right now, because she's had a couple of, it was all coconuts at first, and then it was he's a fascist, and then it was, well, I wouldn't change a thing. But yeah, that fight, I think, crystallized everything that MAGA loves about Donald Trump. Even when he's shot, he has the gumption to raise his fist and say to me, the MAGA person, fight, I'm fighting for you. I think you can be blunt about it and say something a lot of people might not like, but, it feels as if we're all supposed to feel sorry for Kamala Harris and Democrats today. The fact is, I think this is evidence that they had the wrong message. Yeah. That the economy matters, that immigration matters more than Democrats, illegal immigration I'm talking about, than Democrats seemed to believe. That the push to spend to slow climate change is on the wrong side of a lot of American perspectives. Trump came in on the other side of that last night. And if you look, you see the map that we had up earlier with the blue states and the red states, right? And just like in Canada, when you see the provinces colored by the party, there are other party supporters inside those jurisdictions, right? But if you look at the data, if you dive in and you see where all the movement, as they say, in the districts, where people shifted further to Republican or further to Democrat across the country last night, it just shifts to the Republican side. The Trump message to secure the border, to fix the economy, to do all those things, to slow down the woke stuff, right? The culture wars that we talk about, the overseas wars, all these things. Like, that's what people voted on. That's what he campaigned on. All the things that he's going to do. We talk about the first 100 days and beyond. All those things he said he was going to do, they say, yeah. That's what we want. We want you to be the bull in the china shop, to put America first, right? To bust it up, to drain the swamp, to borrow all of Trump's terminology. Except for 2020. Is that an anomaly? I don't know, because this is what happened in 2016. Right? And then here he is again. He's busting the system, and Americans are applauding. As I said in 2016, says more about America than it says about Donald Trump.
Absolutely. While we're waiting for Kamala Harris, let's just have a listen and see if we can hear that crowd, see what sort of vibe you're getting from them today. It's nothing. It's nothing like what it was last night. But if you've been to a Harris or Trump rally, all the toing and froing you're seeing happening to, you know, in front of the microphone right now. This is exactly what happens in the moments before the candidate comes out.
100%. And I think I'll throw another thing out there. I think a lot of people are wondering, well, what does this say about Americans' willingness to elect a woman as president? And I don't know. Maybe it doesn't say anything about that. Maybe it says she was a flawed candidate in the way Hillary Clinton was a flawed candidate in the eyes of many. I mean, I think you can make the argument either way. And you can look at the negatives on Trump on that. An adjudicated rapist, right? The Access Hollywood tape and the things that he said in that back in 2016. Mm-hmm. And yet among the many millions who voted for Trump last night were women.
Absolutely.
You know?
And you talk about the granular data. I mean, there are people who are ready to roll up their sleeves and say, all right, let's have a really good look. Those tabs aren't fully out yet, but when they are, it will paint it will give everyone a snapshot of the American family in this particular moment in time. And that's the snapshot that they will use to decide what happens the next time. As we watch this, Rosie, our CBC's chief political correspondent, is here. We were talking last night about how we're interested in this as a country, not just because these are our neighbors. This is not an accident of geography, but because the relationship is so intertwined. How prepared do you think the Trudeau government is for a second Trump administration?
Ish. I don't think they were prepared for the scale and scope of the win, as you've both been talking about, for the magnitude of the mandate that Donald Trump got. I'm not even sure Donald Trump was prepared, frankly. So I think how he uses that mandate is something that Canadians should be rightly watching closely, right? How far does he go on some of these policy issues that will directly affect us? But if you want a sense of where we are today, this country, in relation to Donald Trump, Justin Trudeau, the last time I texted someone, still hasn't spoken to him.
And he wanted to have one of the first calls in.
He had the first call when Joe Biden won, which is perhaps not surprising. But Donald Trump has made time, as Katie points out, to talk to Narendra Modi, to talk to Benjamin Netanyahu,
Viktor Orban,
to talk to Xi Jinping. That was the most recent conversation. But he has not yet spoken to our prime minister. Now, officially, they'll tell you it's scheduling, not unlike the Kamala issue. You know, I would say that there's other things, strategic things being done there by Donald Trump as well. Not that he is interested in picking a fight, not that we are either, but perhaps a little bit of a message in terms of where we sit as a priority for Donald Trump in the immediate. There's been, you know, oodles of reaction out of Ottawa today, sort of frenzied scrums with every cabinet minister you can imagine, and the prime minister obviously congratulating the president-elect and saying that he's willing to work with him, but also warning, and I thought this was an interesting part of what Justin Trudeau said today, we've done this before, but the world is a lot more complicated than it was in 2016. And he's right, it is. There are two wars. There's a lot of more complex geopolitics, you know, economic challenges. So he sort of put that out there. And then I would just point to another comment from the industry minister, François-Philippe Champagne, who has been one of sort of the leads in terms of the Team Canada approach in the U.S. And he said, when he was pushed and pushed and pushed on the issue of tariffs, listen, this just happened. He's got this whole transition period. We'll see who he brings into the tent. We'll see what happens once he gets into office. And he sort of said, like, let's be calm. He said he's already been texting with people this morning. Who they are, I don't know. But he's been texting with Americans this morning already about some of these issues. So, I think some surprise is happening in Ottawa, but there is also a mobilization happening for sure.
I seem to recall, I seem to recall a conversation you and I had in Trump 1.0 about how the rest of the world was, well, if they want to be all isolationist, maybe we have to just accept that and deal with ourselves separately. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And I wonder if that's a part of the thing, like how isolationist will Trump want to be now?
Yeah.
Will he play ball? Will I have to wait 3 days before I can get a phone call with him? And if that's the case forever, is he trying to send me a signal? Well, maybe I'm going to look over here for trading partners or other alliances.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Canada has done some of that, to your point, right? Like the Indo-Pacific strategy that they finally started to mobilize around creating trade deals with Japan and Korea and other things, is about making sure that they are not wholly reliant on our biggest trading partner, and that's not going to change. I'm sure there will be a phone call. Like, I don't want to play.
Yeah,
I don't want to make this into bigger than it is. There'll be a phone call, and it will be amicable, and they'll both say what they need to say. But it wasn't the first call.
Interesting. So I think as we're waiting, look at that. It's 10 minutes after 4. So late for the third attempted scheduling this speech. Lots of complications here, lots of things
Can I
to
throw
do.
another thing out?
Sure.
Hispanic Americans, right? A lot of talk about that the last couple of weeks because of the Puerto Rico floating island of garbage, and even echoing back to when Trump, sorry for the random thing here, Adrienne, echoing back to when Trump was throwing paper towels after the hurricane and such. And what reminded me of this was you talking about getting granular, and he got that vote as well, it would seem. Like, because that stuff doesn't matter, I guess. What matters is bacon costs more. Well, that bothers me, says the voter, right?
This is the conversation that, this is Donald Trump's win, but the other side of that coin is it's the loss for the Democrats, and they have to deconstruct it. And I find it so interesting what Katie was saying about how they're very proud of her. They think she ran the best campaign she could run. She raised a ton of money in a very short amount of time. We had a Democratic strategist on last night who said it was a flawless campaign. Well, actually, no, it wasn't. It didn't work.
Had a pretty big flaw.
It had
Except for that.
It had one job, and it didn't do that job. But it makes you wonder. They probably have to go back to the drawing board on a whole bunch of levels, not just who they are, but how they communicate who they are. And so I'm curious if we can go back to Katie at Howard University, where that crowd is still waiting. What is your sense from the people you've been talking to? Because I know you talk to everybody. What do they think went wrong? What message in particular just landed with a thud?
Here's the thing, Adrienne. As y'all in there are pointing out in this moment, people are telling me they're proud of the campaign Kamala Harris ran, even though it didn't win. It didn't work. It was not successful. There's still a sense of pride here that she got as far as she did in this moment. But that doesn't get you to the White House. That doesn't win you the Senate, and that doesn't win the House necessarily. I know that we're still waiting on things like that. But I think that there was a sense of relief that the tone coming from the Democrats was not the same kind of tone coming from Republicans. But again, it didn't work. It didn't get her across the line, and it didn't get her into the White House. And so there is going to be a deep soul searching. When I spoke with people who are waiting to get in, they want to witness this concession speech, the things that they sort of said to me are they're shocked, they're upset, but not necessarily surprised big picture. And they cited a couple of things that we've heard from commentators over the past couple of days. I spoke with a number of Black women who said, don't underestimate the power of racism and sexism in the United States. And that is something I heard time after time after time from people waiting in line. So from that perspective, that is something that did play a factor in this election campaign. There is concern that there wasn't a strong enough message on the economy. You look at poll after poll after poll in the final days of this campaign, and Donald Trump consistently did really well with voters in terms of being someone who was thought to be able to, handle the economy with confidence and make life more affordable for Americans. In Canada, I know in Canada there is so much concern about the cost of living crisis, about housing affordability, about inflation, the price of groceries. Those challenges that exist in Canada also very deeply exist here in the United States, particularly when it comes to rent, when it comes to housing availability. Rent in places like DC, in like some major centers that usually attract younger people trying to start out their careers. Rent is, like in many of these places, very, very unaffordable. And so a message from a candidate on economic relief, on promising to fix what, Donald Trump had said he was going to fix what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris had broken, that message resonated. It worked, and it really helped Donald Trump get across that finish line. But here, the mood, as everyone's waiting for Kamala Harris to arrive, political events often happen late. And we do have a note from the team of journalists traveling with Kamala Harris that she has arrived, at Howard University. So she's here somewhere, along with a number of sort of VIP guests, Nancy Pelosi, the former House Speaker, who really had a very significant hand in ensuring that Joe Biden was not the candidate for this election campaign. You'll remember in the days after that CNN debate, she made some very public appearances on television programs in the United States to really encourage Joe Biden to reconsider his position, a really difficult moment in that relationship. Adrienne, the crowd is starting to cheer. I think someone is coming out to either put down a speech or just start things off.
Yeah.
One thing I will mention, Adrienne, is that the staff, the campaign staff here for the Harris-Walz team, they've come around to the risers where we're all situated, and they told us all to turn off our lights and turn off our monitors because they are expecting something to happen up on the stage soon. It happened last night, just before the campaign co-chair came out and told everyone to go home for the night. And so it's a sign that things are happening quickly, and we do know that she is on location at Howard University. It's just a matter of time before she comes out and addresses her disappointed supporters.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that part of that delay is because she has a lot of people to talk to, and it's not a quick congratulations, thank you very much, we did it. It's there's a bit of a forensic audit probably happening in every single conversation she has, and it's going to be happening for a long time. Very briefly, Paul, and we're all keeping an eye on this podium here, but very briefly, when you hear Katie talk about the economy, that was Donald Trump's final message, right? It's an old line, but it works. You're better off today than you were 4 years ago. The answer for Americans was absolutely not. It seems that the, it doesn't matter what you dress up with the likes of endorsements from Taylor Swift and Beyonce, that doesn't help you buy milk and bread, which was sort of the point he was trying to make.
And to that question, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Her answer effectively was put on The View. I wouldn't change a thing.
Right.
Right?
That was
Game
devastating
over.
as an ad.
You talk about Biden's stumble at the debate. That's the moment for her where I think people just said, what are you talking about? And you want me to vote for you? It's a hard thing for her as Vice President Joe Biden. She's got to run on that record. Trump didn't have to do that. But it struck me watching that moment that she didn't anticipate that question and didn't have an appropriate answer for it. You know what I would have said? Hey, Biden got us through the COVID, right? He brought the economy back up. Now my job is to take it to the next place. There's probably a better way to put it than that, but that's an easy way through that question. She didn't have it, and I think that resonated with voters that were, many of them probably looking for a reason to vote for her, right? Biden's gone. She energized the party at first. Give me a reason. And instead, she said, I wouldn't change a thing.
So it's gotten a little quieter there at Howard University. The music has been turned down. The lights have been turned down, in part because the lights focused at the podium like that. What happens is that for the person, and we know this is people who stare into lights every day, that those lights would bounce off and make it difficult to read the prompter. Is my understanding of why this always happens at the rallies like this. So she's coming at some point.
It's going to be tough for her.
Well,
let's be honest.
This is not
setting everything
speech,
else aside, right? I'm thinking back to Hillary Clinton coming out. She's been spending the morning, no doubt, as receiving phone calls. I think, as Katie was saying, 100 days is not a long time to run a campaign, and for all those who are saying that she did what she could. We can talk about Joe Biden and hanging on too long, but at the same time, she was running for president. She had a shot. She failed. She had to call the victor. Well, I guess whether she has or hasn't now.
She has.
Okay, yeah.
This afternoon.
And now she's got to stand out there at that podium with the dimmed lights and speak to the world about that.
Can I ask Paul a question about something he said at the beginning there about it's not because she was a woman necessarily. It's not because she was a black South Asian woman, but this is now the second woman to lose to Donald Trump. So what is your sense of whether that is insurmountable in terms of a glass ceiling in the
America,
United States?
you mean?
Yes, yeah. Because it's not. I totally agree with you. It's not just because she was a woman, but. That's now
some
two
things
women
are
that
undeniable.
Yeah. So I wonder what your thoughts are, though.
My thoughts are that I don't know. Those are two powerful bits of evidence that it is very hard in America to do that. Kim Campbell, yes, but no in this country, right? So who are we to say? But I think the truth is it depends on the candidate, the person, male or female, black or white, South Asian or not, and the message to voters. What do I want at the end of the day? I want food on the table. It doesn't matter who allows me to do that, is the altruistic way to look at it. I met a lot of people who worried that Americans don't want, can't deal with, can't stomach a woman. I think I could have time for a quick anecdote. On the way into the RNC in Cleveland in 2016. So Ohio, reddish state, urban, Cleveland, had a taxi driver, the wisdom of a cab driver, right? It was a black woman around 40 years old, and I just making small talk with her. Who are you going to vote for? And she, Donald Trump. I said, really? That I would not have expected you to say that. And she said, I just don't think a woman can be president. Too emotional. And I was like, really? Is that where we are? Is that where this country is? Is that where people are? For her, the answer is yes. Is that a factor? Is it a glass ceiling that can't be shattered? I don't know.
You add that to the particular situation of this moment in time. We talked about this at length last night, that this is the year of more elections around the world than at any other time. And why that's useful is it gives us a pattern to look at. And the persistent pattern is a rough year for incumbencies, right? A rough year for an incumbent. And
progressives.
And progressives, right. And both of these people arguably could wear the mantle of incumbent. He was president. She's in. But, Rob Rousseau used to say, it's just throw the bums out.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny. Back to the early days in the shortened campaign of Kamala Harris and back to the gender issue, right? And everything was unicorns and rainbows and coconut memes, and now's the time. Now it will be not just broken, but smashed to bits. Bacon costs a lot of money, right? Springfield is changing too fast. Pick your example of something from one of the culture wars or one of the irritants or too many of this and not enough of that. It's all happening. And I just want answers to my problems. I mean, at the end of the day, that's politics 101 as well, isn't it, right? Like fix things that are bothering people, give answers to. I've always thought that even though Trump stole that, I think, from Reagan as well, not only are you better off 4 years ago? Right. Make America great again is an old phrase, right? But it's a beautiful one in a way, right? It's kind of perfect. You want your old life back? You want prices the way they were before COVID? You want your white picket fence the way it was in the 1950s? I'll promise you that. It's powerful.
So apparently at Howard, there's some cheering going on. There's Tim Walz, Governor Tim Walz, who was the selection for the VP for Kamala Harris. This is a man who was a rising star and now has to figure out what his destiny is. He's very popular with a lot of people. There was some thought early on when Kamala Harris did not choose Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. Did she make a fatal error in that choice? I think last night made it pretty clear. It didn't matter. It really, this wasn't about Walz over Shapiro. It almost never is about the VP choice anyway. But this is something much, much bigger. And when you were talking, for example, about Springfield changing, it reminds us again that, everything Donald Trump said, all those memes of they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. People just let that go. It meant nothing. You see people at the bottom of your screen, sort of the cameras up, the hands up. That's because they are announcing her. So this is probably a good time for us just to stop, look, and listen, because there she is.
afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you all. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. So let me say, and I love you back, and I love you back. So let me say, my heart is full today. My heart is full today, full of gratitude for the trust you have placed in me, full of love for our country, and full of resolve. The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. As long as we never give up, and as long as we keep fighting. To my beloved Doug and our family, I love you so very much. To President Biden and Dr. Biden, thank you for your faith and support. To Governor Walz and the Walz family, I know your service to our nation will continue. And to my extraordinary team, to the volunteers who gave so much of themselves, to the poll workers and the local election officials, I thank you all. Look, I am so proud of the race we ran, and the way we ran it, over the 107 days of this campaign. We have been intentional about building community and building coalitions, bringing people together from every walk of life and background, united by love of country with enthusiasm and joy in our fight for America's future. And we did it with the knowledge that we all have so much more in common than what separates us. Now, I know folks are feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power. A fundamental principle of American democracy is that when we lose an election, we accept the results. That principle, as much as any other, distinguishes democracy from monarchy or tyranny. And anyone who seeks the public trust must honor it. At the same time, in our nation, we owe loyalty not to a president or a party, but to the Constitution of the United States. And loyalty to our conscience and to our God. My allegiance to all three is why I am here to say, while I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. The fight for freedom, for opportunity, for fairness, and the dignity of all people. A fight for the ideals at the heart of our nation the ideals that reflect America at our best. That is a fight I will never give up. I will never give up the fight for a future where Americans can pursue their dreams, ambitions, and aspirations, where the women of America have the freedom to make decisions about their own body and not have their government telling them what to do. We will never give up the fight to protect our schools and our streets from gun violence. And America, we will never give up the fight for our democracy, for the rule of law, for equal justice, and for the sacred idea that every one of us, no matter who we are or where we start out, has certain fundamental rights and freedoms that must be respected and upheld. And we will continue to wage this fight in the voting booth, in the courts, and in the public square. And we will also wage it in quieter ways, in how we live our lives, by treating one another with kindness and respect, by looking in the face of a stranger and seeing a neighbor, by always using our strength to lift people up, to fight for the dignity that all people deserve. The fight for our freedom will take hard work, but like I always say, we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work can be joyful work. And the fight for our country is always worth it. It is always worth it. To the young people who are watching, it is... I love you. To the young people who are watching, it is okay to feel sad and disappointed, but please know it's going to be okay. On the campaign, I would often say, when we fight, we win. But here's the thing. Sometimes the fight takes a while. That doesn't mean we won't win. That doesn't mean we won't win. The important thing is don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop trying to make the world a better place. You have power. You have power. And don't you ever listen when anyone tells you something is impossible because it has never been done before. You have the capacity to do extraordinary good in the world. And so to everyone who is watching, do not despair. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves. This is a time to organize, to mobilize, and to stay engaged for the sake of freedom and justice and the future that we all know we can build together. Look, many of you know I started out as a prosecutor, and throughout my career I saw people at some of the worst times in their lives. People who had suffered great harm and great pain, and yet found within themselves the strength and the courage and the resolve to take the stand, to take a stand, to fight for justice, to fight for themselves, to fight for others. So let their courage be our inspiration. Let their determination be our charge. And I'll close with this. There's an adage an historian once called a law of history, true of every society across the ages. The adage is, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. I know many people feel like we are entering a dark time, but for the benefit of us all, I hope that is not the case. But here's the thing, America, if it is, let us fill the sky with the light of a brilliant, brilliant billion of stars. The light of optimism, of faith, of truth, and service. HU. And may that work guide us, even in the face of setbacks, toward the extraordinary promise of the United States of America. I thank you all. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. I thank you all.
And there she goes. Kamala Harris, not the speech she wanted clearly to deliver on this day. Interesting. So many things to talk about in here. You know, she, of course, conceded the election, talked about a peaceful transfer of power, but said, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. Told everyone it would be okay, but then said, but if it isn't, you know, fill the sky with a billion stars, fill the darkness with a billion stars, encouraging people to maintain the fight, talking about everything she spoke about on the campaign trail, about freedom, about democracy, about justice, about reproductive rights. What she didn't talk about is some of what Democrats will have to be talking about, is the stuff that they didn't talk about necessarily on the campaign trail, mostly the economy in particular. Lots to deconstruct here. So curious about the feeling on the ground there. There goes Tim Walz with that characteristic face that we've come, the expression on his face that we've come to see. She thanked him for his service and said she knows it will continue. And wow, they are leaving quickly. Katie Simpson on the ground there at Howard University. How did the crowd react to that speech, Katie?
Adrienne, right now I'm standing next to a staffer that I asked her to come on and chat with us. The tears are streaming down her face so hard right now. She has tear streaks on the front of her shirt. She's just making her way down a set of stairs that are right there. This is a very deeply emotional crowd in this moment. My colleague Liza, who's operating the camera here, from her vantage point, she was actually able to zoom in and get a closer look at some of the faces of Kamala Harris's family members. The Emhoff children, her stepchildren, looking very emotional, very upset. A lot of big, heavy sunglasses sort of in that VIP area where so many people had been rooting so deeply, working so hard, hoping for a different outcome. So there is a really visible, heavy sense of sadness. The woman who is standing right beside us, she's a part of the staff that's sort of been coordinating that, making sure the media has their security passes. They're supposed to be in here. And she looked a little bit emotional last night, but she was standing here just sobbing as Kamala Harris delivered that speech. And she won't be alone. She won't be alone in that moment right now. So That is how many people here at Howard University on that front line who just watched that speech. Obviously, it's not the speech that they had hoped for, but there are a couple of key messages there. Democrats had framed this election really as an existential sort of referendum on the future of America. And you could say that about any election, but particularly given Donald Trump's history, the way that he has sort of pushed up against the norms of democracy, the way Democrats ran this campaign was with a warning, a concern that Donald Trump will try to push the boundaries of American Constitution, or democracy, and push the boundaries of the Constitution, if not try to, break right through them. That is the campaign they run. And so there is a sense of fear in this crowd that America is about to enter a dark time from that perspective of Democrats. It's a very different feeling, very different mood than what you'd get from Republicans in this moment. But Kamala Harris tailored her message to those Democrats in this morning who in this moment who might be feeling very overwhelmed, very distraught, very upset, and that is what is weighing over this crowd in this moment. She tried to offer a message of hope, saying even though she respects the outcome of this election, that's something that happens in the United States, really giving a nod to that. The crowd actually cheered when she mentioned, a peaceful transfer of power. Who would have thought that that's something that gets a line of applause in the United States of America? But after what happened in 2020, that is something that, does now stand out in a political speech, committing to the peaceful transfer of power. But to offer a message of reassurance to those Democrats who may be feeling very low right now, who are very worried about the direction of this country, especially given some of the rhetoric that came from the Trump campaign. She tried to offer that message of reassurance. Also, she did touch on some themes of unity, as something that she talked about during the campaign, saying, that as Americans, we have more in common than what divides us. This is a deeply divided country, and that's the kind of message she's trying to deliver in this moment, but really sticking to the message that the fight, they may have lost this battle, but they will continue on in their fight. But again, what that fight looks like after this loss, that from the Democrats' perspective is just absolutely devastating. How do they figure out to run more successful campaigns? Those will be the questions that they need to answer in the days going forward. But for now, everyone here is really just feeling their feelings.
All right. Katie Simpson at Howard University. Thank you, Katie, and thanks for all the work that you have done. It has been, I think, 14 years, on this campaign. Before we go to Paul and Rosie here, if we can, I'd really like to play a tweet or show you a tweet that came out from Bernie Sanders. And it came out sort of not that long ago, and I'm mentioning it because I think this is something that we can talk about. He said, "It should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party which has abandoned working class people would find that the working class has abandoned them. While the Democratic leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and want change, and they're right."
And so's Bernie. So many echoes of 2016, right? Instead of Beyonce, it'd be Katy Perry, right? But everything else, the same kind of things were said, and there were people in tears back then, and it's like the Democrats had a chance to sort of say, hey, what did we do wrong there? And they didn't, they couldn't figure it out. Look, reality check here. It hasn't been a coup.
Right.
He got voted in, and it wasn't through a trickery of the Electoral College. It was the popular vote. That was a great quote about when there's darkness is when you see the stars. Love that. There's another one that gets used a lot, and that's the Maya Angelou, right? When someone tells you who they are, believe them. Well, Trump told America who he was in 2016 through to 2020, and they believed him and elected him president with the popular vote. Like, that's to the Democrats. Yeah, we've said this how many times in the last many hours sitting in a TV studio. They got to fix their message because it's not resonating with Americans.
Yeah, and I get what that speech had to be about, right?
Sure.
About unity and concession and hope for Democrats going forward. A little surprised that, as I said to you during the speech, that there was no mention of the weight that some people are feeling or the anxiety people are feeling around the economy. And a little surprised that there was no mention that something didn't work.
Right.
You know, like no mention that, sorry, I didn't get to where you were, America, and I wasn't able to convince you to give me a chance. If last night was in part a rejection of the establishment, a demonstration of the populist movement of America, I think the other piece that was missing was a Democratic Party not putting anything in the window beyond this guy's a problem and a dangerous. And we heard much of that again here from Kamala Harris. And I think that's also part of the problem. You can't just go after someone. You have to have stuff to put on offer. And yes, it was democracy, but as we were talking about so often last night, for so many people, they do not feel connected to democracy. They might now, but they didn't before.
You know, one of our colleagues was saying that he has family in the United States who were sharing sort of a meme of someone saying, who was voting for Trump, yeah, 34 felonies. Like, that's not the number that matters to me. You know, the number that matters to me is like $5 gas or $8 gas or this much for milk. Like, stop saying these things that aren't connected to my life.
And even on democracy, I'm not here to defend any of the January 6th rioters, because there were some people that really went above and beyond the pale, obviously. But there's an argument to be made that the bulk of them who marched up and then got carried away felt so strongly because they had a guy that was listening to them in the way Bernie Sanders describes, like from the working class, and somebody who was going to pay attention to the price of gas and other things. It wasn't the issue then that it is now. But, and that they just felt somehow he's getting away. He was the answer. And that's the passion that Trump brings to his people and gets from his people in return, because these are the things that matter. We keep coming back to that, right? It's a really powerful stuff. I mean, Sanders is right. Democrats used to own the working class. That was their brand, and things just flipped. And they haven't realized that. And here we are again, or here they are again. You know, it's really stunning. So
this has been a conversation about the party that lost, but this is obviously an election about the party and the person who won. So Chris Reyes, it's a good time to go to Chris, who is in West Palm Beach, Florida, where Trump delivered his victory speech last night. Chris, you've had a little bit of time, not much really, to think about it, but what are you hearing from the Trump camp about why this worked so well for them?
Yeah. Adrienne, if I could just start with the Harris speech as well, because I think it's worth mentioning that that was a classy and dignified speech. And if you're somebody who sees themselves in Harris, that speech probably hits different. And I mention that because I think Donald Trump took great pride in having a very different style. And his supporters would call it authentic, real, and raw. And he used that style to really strike a chord with more than half of this country. And he struck a chord by talking about a few things over and over and over again on the campaign trail. And you know what I noticed listening to both Harris and Trump in these few months of the campaign when they held so many rallies is that Harris took a lot of time talking about who she is. You know, she had to introduce herself. And Trump very quickly got to the issues. And he talked about just a few things, and he kept saying them over and over again. Shut down the border, fix the economy, tough on crime, bring back the American dream. And obviously that message resonated. And not only that, it resonated with a much broader base. Let me give you some examples. In nationwide exit polls, Trump led Harris by 10 points with Hispanic men. He also took a chunk out of the Democrats' significant black voter base, with Harris winning way less in that demographic than Joe Biden did in 2020. In Dearborn, Michigan, where we were before the election, talking to voters, this is the largest Arab American majority city in the U.S., they were very angry about Joe Biden's stance in the Middle East, his stalwart support for Israel, how he was handling the war in Gaza. They wanted to punish him, even at the expense of electing Trump for president. And very clearly, Trump's message of talking about Harris as very much a part of the Biden administration worked in that regard. And then it also worked with regards to the border, because Trump dominated border states. And remember, he went into this vote with the support of a very big union representing 18,000 border agents. In the swing states that's been hardest hit by this economic downturn, we're talking about Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia. These are states with high unemployment rates. He dominated the support there. And then if we can just talk a little bit about the, if I could call it like the anti-establishment crowd, maybe this is a crowd that gets a lot of their information on social media. He really energized the conversation there with the support of like uber popular podcast hosts like Joe Rogan, and of course Elon Musk, who owns X, formerly Twitter. And so this is a much broader coalition than Trump had in 2016 and 2020. Maybe when you thought that a Trump voter would only be white, rural, and working class, clearly, as we're starting to see some of these demographic results, that's not the case. It's worth mentioning, though, guys, the context, that crime is down in this country, that even though inflation hit a peak of 9%, it's been declining ever since. But that's not how people are feeling on the ground, and Trump capitalized on that feeling, and now he has the mandate to match with the Republicans taking control of the Senate, and they're making big gains in the House as well as they're continuing to count those votes.
Okay. Chris Reyes, a lot there. Lots of people are going to be going over that data for sure. Chris Reyes in West Palm Beach. We just have a few minutes left, so at this point, why don't we dig into the future, a little bit more about what Donald Trump's priorities will be for his second term. So for that, let's bring in Matthew Bartlett. Matthew is a Republican strategist, former Trump State Department appointee. Matthew, thank you for joining us. Our correspondent, Chris Reyes, just talked about anticipation for the first 100 days. What do you anticipate?
Yeah, Chris kind of laid out, a lot of what Donald Trump has been saying for the past 10 years, and more importantly, what we saw in his first 4 years. I would expect to see that manifest itself in the first 100 days, as well as the lame duck term that Donald Trump now has. It is unclear. While he won a massive victory, including the popular vote, many more senators now in the Senate willing to work with him, advance his agenda. It's still unclear if the United States House of Representatives will be Republican. So even if it is, expect a legislative agenda that will be, a narrow path to drive through. But you will see from the departments, from the agencies, from executive orders, again, going back to a lot of what he has said regarding the border, regarding regulations, and certainly foreign policy as well.
So are you talking, I mean, let's drill down here. Are you talking mass deportations? Are we, it's Monday morning. Is that where he's going to go right away?
I'm sure, as we saw in the first 100 days of the first term, there will be some sort of evaluation of what can be legally done to enforce the law. And, as Americans have said, and maybe even Democrats might be waking up to it, no other country would tolerate a border policy like that, like we have here. And if the notion is, should you enforce the law? I think most Americans would say yes. If I was to go into a foreign country, whether it's Canada or Europe, and be there illegally, I would have an expectation of being deported. So we will see how that happens. And again, the process of which I'm sure will be nuanced, looking at those who have committed crimes first, those that are, legally out of status. So it will be a priority. How it is executed will certainly be up for debate.
One last thought to you here. Can we talk about his cabinet? Who's likely to be around the table?
A lot of names are being thrown about, as you can imagine. Rick Grinnell, who is a prominent gay Republican American, has played an interesting role in the last administration with a foreign policy role, could be in charge of legislative affairs. His name is being floated for Secretary of State. You're seeing names in Treasury coming from the Senate, maybe a Bill Hagerty. So you're seeing a lot of, I wouldn't call them establishment names, but known names, names that can get Senate approval. At the end of the day, United States senators will have their prerogative whether to confirm or not some of his, nominees. So the notion is, he will be guided by some seasoned hands.
Okay, Matthew Bartlett, there will be so much more to talk about guardrails, strategy, and I'm sure we'll be doing that in the days to come. Matthew Bartlett, thank you very much.
Understood.
So thank you for joining us for our live coverage of Kamala Harris's concession speech. She struck a gracious tone, hopeful tone, I suppose, in what must have been a very difficult speech. A big thank you to Paul Hunter and Rosemary Barton for helping to guide the coverage throughout. And of course, Katie Simpson on the ground in Washington. As we say goodbye, here's another look at the Vice President as she delivered her speech at Howard University. Coming up next, Power and Politics host David Cochrane continues our special coverage of the results of the U.S. election live from Washington. Stay with CBC News Network. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon.